Each of us occupy a number of positions in relationship with reality. Those positions are strong and strengthen to the degree that they attune with and acknowledge the largest patterns of energy in our reality. And they're weak to the degree that they violate or fight the largest patterns in reality. People are not good or bad, but the positions that people take have constructive or destructive impact relative to a set of objectives. And the set of objectives that govern the Human Awareness Institute or any public nonprofit that's in the business of teaching love, into me you see, healthy sexuality, creating a world where everyone wins, is in the business of learning the protocols that allow the students, the participants, to more successfully interact with the reality that is. And it is damaging when a teacher, when a leader, leads with misinformed, faulty, illegal, and weak positions. So what are the positions that I consider to be the biggest threat to the mission, to the team, to the participants, and the facilitators at the Human Awareness Institute? Number one, the idea that a Human Awareness Institute facilitator who has been chosen, trained, and recommended without caveat to all the high participants, without disclosing that they are doing therapy without a license. And licenses are just pieces of paper, but without disclosing the lack of psychological training to do that job well. When such a facilitator escalates a romantic relationship, escalates a sexual relationship inside a paid therapeutic container, leading to the inevitable harm of a client, meaning this is not a new thing. This is one of the biggest issues in the book for therapists. It never ends well for the client to have a sexual relationship with a therapist. Prostitution relationships don't tend to end that well either. And when you're paying to have sex with a therapist, you've got the confluence of statistics about all the atrocious things that have happened for the client having a sexual relationship with a therapist, someone that's supposedly trying to help them. And you've got the tension and dynamic around prostitution as well, because the client is paying the therapist for a sexual and romantic relationship. The next idea that's incredibly weak as it intersects with data and reality is the idea that upon being given incontrovertible evidence in the form of a 10-hour recording of the abuse, meaning more than 10 specific things going on in that session that go against the mission of HIGH, that break facilitator agreements, that severely endanger the client, that while claiming this is not a HIGH issue, it is appropriate for the HIGH facilitator body to exert pressure on the participant not to tell the community what's going on. Now, why is that a big deal? Well, high is all about being a choice. But if I give you a glass of orange juice and I don't tell you that it's laced with arsenic, and I say, would you like to drink? You're not at choice because the toxin is undisclosed. You're only at choice if I inform you that the orange juice I'd like to offer you has 2 tablespoons of arsenic in it. You need transparency. You need into me, you see, before you can be in any meaningful way at choice. So to hide one of the most egregious violations of any teacher, of any therapist, not only sexually abusing a client, but charging them to do so, is the arsenic in the orange juice. There's nothing wrong with the juice. It's the toxins that come with it. The third position that's incredibly weak is the idea that the Human Awareness Institute should not volunteer an apology for poorly training, poorly selecting, recommending without caveat, and failure to disclose the absence of a license, which might raise some red flags, since you need to do a certain amount of psychological training before you get your license. And top on the list of that training is do not have a romantic relationship with your client. Do not get so personally enmeshed with your client that you can't do your job as a therapist, which is the only reason you deserve to be paid. The idea, the position that we can recommend our own to you, and if you happen to get fucked up, it's nothing to do with us. We're committed to the entire world winning, but we're not committed to our clients, our participants, being kept safe from sexual abuse, is an incredibly weak position. The other idea that's weak is that upon learning that these 3 protocols, sex with a therapist, pressure to keep it secret, the absence of support that comes from keeping something secret, because the whole point of Into Me You See is that you actually have the possibility to relate and understand someone if you see them. But if the biggest event in their lives is buried to protect the abuse of their leaders, they're not seen. So they are not understood. So they are not cared about. That upon learning about the PTSD that resulted from this, that rather than educating the high client base, rather than educating the team, that when the participant took steps to publicly publish the information, to fulfill the high mission statement, which means you've got to be able to differentiate between those that are giving you straight orange juice and those that are giving you orange juice laced with arsenic. The idea that it is not a high issue to resolve, to compensate, to see to the wellness of the participant, but it is a high issue to go to the extraordinary measure of suing them in European court to try and shut down the website telling the truth about the abuse. It's a weak position because it's fighting itself. You have Human Awareness Institute, and then it would be free to send out human awareness and just, hey, this went on, we're taking steps, we're really sorry, this is on us. We're taking responsibility. But no, our client is taking responsibility to do our job and protect the public. What we're doing is silencing human awareness. We don't want anyone to know. We don't want our client base to be aware. We're only the Human Awareness Institute. We don't actually want awareness about the dangers that we pose to our clients in a leadership role. The other idea, number 5, is that Peter Sandhill, who participated in 2 waves of sexual abuse over 10 years, did, under duress, offer an apology. The idea that is weak in terms of it's at odds with the apology is that he did not offer a refund for the paid sexual abuse that he acknowledged went on. And upon bringing this to his attention, still ignored the request. So this would be like taking your laptop into Best Buy to get the viruses cleaned out. Got working a bit slow, get the viruses cleaned out. How much is it going to cost? Well, it'll be $300. We'll go through everything, we'll clean out your viruses and give you your laptop back. The laptop comes back with a broken keyboard, a shattered screen. You can't even tell if there's viruses there or not because they damaged it while having your laptop in their custody. And here you are, here's your $300 bill. Sorry about the laptop. Well, if Best Buy actually ran their business this way, they would be toast. The manager would be called in. If he didn't figure it out, it's an absolute nightmare. But the position of the Human Awareness Institute is that not only will we not give you a refund, Ann Watts, my other therapist, who I did most of my work with, her first proposal upon learning that the person that she trained, and she was the last person to recommend Peter Sandhill to me without caveat. Not we don't know what this is, not we have our limits here. We're great and we're here to help. We've got this covered. We're here for you with our mission of a world where everyone wins. But Ann Watts' response to listening to the recording of the student she trained and recommended was not, oh my gosh, I'm so sorry. I'm sorry I recommended him. I'm sorry I didn't do my job to train. I'm sorry I didn't disclose it wasn't a license. What Ann's proposal was that I pay her $100 an hour to mediate between the therapist she trained and recommended and her own client who trusted her recommendation and was sexually abused under the influence of psychedelics in a paid therapeutic session. No one would send their daughter, their brother, their mother, or themselves submit to going into the most sacred terrains of the psyche, knowing that, by the way, if you get sexually abused by me or one of my colleagues, we will A, cover it up, B, not give you a refund, 3, not apologize, and 4, suggest that you hire us to sort out the new wave of damage. It is a laughably weak position, and it is the position held by the leadership of the Human Awareness Institute. 6, that even after knowing all of this, you would keep the employee on staff. Peter Sandhill was retained as a facilitator after breaking the facilitator agreements. Now, the weakness of this position is several-fold. Number one, you think of, what if a team member had done this? What if a team member had claimed to be a good therapist, had taken money, had sexually abused a client, and the client communicated this to the facilitator body? Well, because their asses aren't on the line, meaning none of them get fired if that occurs, and because their reputation would be on the line if they didn't take action, that team member would be expelled. Appropriately so, because the problem, particularly when you have a psychologically and relationally illiterate client base, the worst situation for your mission is that people who don't know what they're doing are teaching faulty practices to other people who don't know whether they're good or not, and are thus in a vulnerable position to be influenced. The position that you would retain on staff in a leadership position and bring in new participants and tell them the mission statement. We're committed to a world where everyone wins, but we won't tell you about the arsenic in our orange juice. The orange juice tastes great, good, organic, fresh, all that they say about orange juice. But we are going to conceal the information you need as a participant and a team member to be at choice. It's a weak position. The last and similarly weak position is that, having made the first weak position of saying that a high facilitator sexually abusing a high client is not a high issue in the role as a public nonprofit with this mission. We're in the business of making the entire world win, but we are committed to our clients losing, because a certain percentage of high participants will be damaged if they do not understand the risks. It's like sending someone out in a Formula One race car and not disclosing, by the way, we've been getting reports that our brakes fail from time to time, but we'd like you to rent the car. We don't think it'll be an issue, and so we're not going to tell you the safety statistics that you need to make an informed decision. And we are not going to dialogue with concerned clients or members of the public about the safety measures necessary to protect our clients. So any informed psychologist, any informed attorney, any informed marriage and family therapist, and any informed member of the public understands that with holding these 7 positions, the Human Awareness Institute leadership body is unanimously undermining their basis for existing by destroying their mission, and that these positions, not the people, are the enemy of the facilitators, myself, every team member, and every participant. However, facilitators that hold on to these positions in the face of data, in the face of reality, meaning what's the reality? What's the larger pattern of energy here? Peter Sandhill, Ann Watts, and the entire facilitator body have broken multiple laws with this practice and cover-up. So that's a pretty big body of energy to fight rather than attune with. They violated every rule in the book on personal relationships with a client and all of that. That's a pretty big body of work. There's 100,000 therapists around the rule who would all check the boxes correctly on what the position should be. And 5% of the population could easily understand all of these things with our level of psychological and relational and therapeutic illiteracy. Now, these are not new positions. Peter, Sarah, Anne, Jason, they didn't invent these positions. These are the positions of the Jeffrey Epstein attorneys. They're the positions of all of the sex scandals that we deal with constantly. They're the position of our president, who is above the law. When other people break the law, of course they should be in prison. But when we break the law, well, I'm the president. These aren't new positions. They're just incredibly destructive and weak positions. And to the extent that they are elevated to leadership, or that leadership is sustained through a protocol of secrecy and communication control, it damages, more than anything else that I know, the possibility of high still being a tax-free, legitimate, respected organization 5 years from now. Because this didn't just happen with me. A distraught trauma therapist contacted me a year after this all went down, and after communicating how she had gone to the police to report sexual abuse in the context of a high support group. She was talked out of honoring her boundaries and her rights. And she was promised that this had never happened before. The trouble with a shaky fabric of secrecy and lies like this is, of course, they were still dialoguing with a client they had induced into PTSD. Because when you communicate through these positions, our safety is more important than you. Our secrets are more important to us than your ability to be seen and honored where you are. We need, and our needs are more important than your well-being, the paying client. That value hierarchy, our need to protect our crimes, is elevated above your need to do what you came to do when you signed up to learn about love, intimacy, and healthy sexuality. And that segues into, because we're looking at a mission, we're looking at secrets, we're looking at the absence of data. And almost everyone who's been involved with high for a period of time has gotten some taste of the arsenic in the orange juice. And I want to ask you a couple of questions. Do you know the difference between highly sensitive and neurotypical people? Because 10 to 20% of the population is highly sensitive, and they relate to reality very differently than the other 80%. So if you don't know which group you belong to, and particularly if you're in that 10-20% category, you're going to have problems that relate from not understanding yourself and that relate from other people not understanding you. And I had a series of interactions in my first few months of high, all of which are predictable and preventable, but they require data. Meaning in the first few months of learning about high, I was sexually propositioned by the first high facilitator I did one-on-one work with, Peter Sandhill. Within 30 minutes of my first session with him, the conversation is revolving around his sexual interest in me as a heterosexual male. Several sessions in, he's suggesting that I pay him $600 to do MDMA with him in his house. Both take MDMA and see what happens. Within the first few months of doing my first 4 workshops, I had come into the community very sexually ignorant. I had 1 or 2 lovers. I knew I didn't know what I was doing. That's why I wanted to go to school. I knew my parents didn't know what they were doing. I'd watched their marriage. I knew I didn't know what I was doing. So I was here to learn. And I didn't learn about attachment disorder. You won't have found that in the high curriculum either. But it is essential to understand before you begin escalating relationships into a sexual relationship. I didn't learn about sensitivity before. Sex is like gasoline. It amplifies the pattern that's there. If that pattern is a self-destruct pattern, you just hit the wall faster with sex than bumbling around without it. It's an accelerant. And the responsible thing to do before hitting those walls, being re-traumatized, going through abandonment dynamics, going through shame and disorientation, is to understand your love language, to understand your sensitivity point on the scale, to understand the attachment pattern that you have, and to understand what love is. Believe it or not, I've gone through 30 workshops with the Human Awareness Institute, and love has never been defined. Abuse has never been defined. Trauma has never been defined. Attachment disorder has never been defined. PTSD has never been defined. Instead, we are asked to call everything that goes on in this space love without knowing the word. What does it mean? It means whatever's going on in that room. It's a self-referential loop. This is the room of love. So if it's happening in the room, it must be love. One of the most insidious aspects of not knowing the important milestones in oneself that would allow one to be capable of having a sustainable win-win relationship. In other words, the commitment to having a sustainable win-win relationship involves learning the things that make that possible. If you have repressed trauma, you will not be in a win-win loving relationship if you don't know what it is or how to respond. It's that simple. People are not bad, but the position that you can enter a sustainable win-win relationship and have trauma, complex PTSD, not have any language for it, or have the protocol to educate your partner. In other words, there's a safe sex conversation, great, wonderful. But there isn't a safe psychological conversation that says, these are my attachment patterns. By the way, if I have sex with you, I will desperately cling to you or I will push you away rapidly. Good to know, particularly if your partner has the opposite patterns. So this has not just been, the biggest trauma and crisis of my life and survival. It's been a jarring, painful wake-up call that the protocols of asking for your 100% without understanding yourself is destructive and narcissistic at best. I asked for my 100% as I knew it more than 1,000 times. I rarely got that 100%, but I hit wall after wall after wall. And so I'd go back to the protocol. Let's ask for my 100% again. Hit another wall. When you have a faulty map, an incomplete map of reality, the invisible objects on that map hit you by surprise, sometimes at high speed if sex is involved, because there's no doubt about it that my sexuality increased in amplitude and frequency by 500%, a very common phenomena for anyone that goes through the high workshops and regularly associates with the community. So physical sexuality up 300, 400, 500, 600%. But so is trauma. So is attachment disorder. So is loneliness. So is confusion. The confusion I felt when I left my first round of work with Peter Sandhill feeling worse, having identified that I only felt worse around him, and having no idea why I felt worse, because I didn't know what I didn't know, and my teacher, Peter Sandhill, called it love and said he really cared about me. The only conclusion was there must have been something wrong with me, which is the same shame loop that goes on with every child and a dysfunctional parent. Ann Watts was good enough to acknowledge at one point that what had happened with Peter Sandhill was, in essence, a reenactment of all my childhood abuses. But this time I paid for it. When I was abused as a child, my parents did it for free, and it's a weak position to say that and not advocate for retraining, apology, and a refund when you discover that your client has paid your colleague, your student, to re-traumatize them. The book is freely available, sexwithatherapist.org. Link is below. I didn't know this was a thing. It turns out 12% of anonymously surveyed therapists admit to having sexual relationships with their clients. Those are just the ones who admit it. I think the numbers based on that and based on the fact that what happens here is not new. None of these positions are unique to anyone at High. You could turn to any of the cults, any of the sex scandals, be it with presidents, be it with CEOs, be it with fathers abusing their children. You'll find the same patterns. These patterns permeate our culture, and they are the arsenic in the orange juice. If you don't know what they are, and this is really where a leader's role comes in, you've got to be able to differentiate. This is orange juice, this is arsenic, this is orange juice laced with arsenic. No to the arsenic, and however good the orange juice is, if it's laced with arsenic, it does more harm than good. And that's really the tragedy of these types of situations, is you have basically good people making predictable mistakes in a psychologically illiterate culture, tainting their own juice, their own mission, their own product to a toxic level. And you've just got a choice. Do I drink toxic orange juice and hope for some vitamin C? Or where do I go for the pure stuff? Thanks for watching.